As Rita said, I'm also a survivor of prostitution myself. I spent 6 years on Burlington Road in Dublin. I became addicted to heroin at the age of 33, having never taken it out of my life before. So prior to that, I worked 10 years in the health board. I was the administrator of the first long stay detox unit for heroin users. But after 8 years, it's a bit of it didn't happen overnight now, but I became addicted myself, and crime to me was not an option, but I knew I had a valuable commodity. I had a female body which I could sell, and at the time it seemed like a rational decision, but I was addicted to a mind-altering substance at the time, so you don't. And I thought it would be only for a while, just till I got clean, sorted myself out, sorted my partner out, but I had no idea what the street removes from you and prostitution itself. So I was there 6 years. Human trafficking, in the last 18 months of my time on Burlington Road, I stood alongside a trafficked woman, Jenny. It's not her name, it's the name I call all the women I knew. No particular reason, I just think it's a pretty name, and at the very least they deserve. So I would just briefly say how we met and how we got close and what life was like for her. So here we go. I didn't get to meet many women, foreign women, but as I said, one was trafficked onto the street of those years. For obvious reasons, they are kept away, locked up, moved around. In fact, I didn't really know the extent of the problem until I had left prostitution. When I realised how big it was, I was so full of shame and appalled that my country had let it get to this stage. We are connected, both prostitutes and trafficked women, although that initial introduction may be different, but we are connected because we are bought, used, raped, humiliated, and exploited by the same men. Many of the trafficked women, when they get here, they don't realise, as Donald said, they think they are coming to be nannies in Dalkey or waitresses, etc. And so they come willingly. But when they get here, they are met and they are taken to usually anonymous apartment blocks like the IFC, and their passports and phones are taken. And if they are told that we paid for your fare over and you will work, but you will work in prostitution, if they object or struggle or fight or try to escape, they are gang raped into submission. So I'm a survivor of a gang rape myself, and the woman who was with me did not survive, so that breaks you down, and for sure. And then they are moved around constantly, as Donna said again. Paul Maguire's award-winning documentary proved beyond a doubt. Actually, it's quite frightening. Anyway, I used to think when I was out there, you know, I was quite disconnected, addicted, and but however bad I felt, you know, at least I got home at night, you know, for a few hours under my own roof with my daughter. But Jenny didn't have a life like that. This is how we met. I was working one night, it was a quiet night, when I heard a language I recognised. I had not heard it in some years, but I knew it immediately. I looked towards the end of the street and I saw a woman talking on the phone. As she approached me, I smiled and asked if she was speaking. She said, "Yes, do you speak it?" I said, "No, but I had been to that part of Africa and I recognised it." She was overjoyed and we sat and spoke for ages about her homeland, good and bad. We began a friendship, but I soon began to notice things. She would have marks on her face, her arms, her legs. I had a feeling she was looking for someone. She began to open up. That someone had trafficked her from her home right across Europe and finally landing in Ireland. She'd started being trafficked to Greece and Switzerland and then England and now Ireland. Ireland is quite popular for traffickers because it makes the most money, where Germany and Holland and that, you can get pretty much anything for 40, 50 euro, but in Ireland they make a lot of money, so we're quite attractive for them. At this stage she had been completely broken down. His control was all that she knew. He would beat her if she was challenging, kept her passport. She was put out to work at 6 p.m. and worked continuously until 5 a.m. every night. She was addicted to crack cocaine and he was her dealer. She had to return with every 100 euros she made. She made nothing, and there were sometimes she'd only have 80, and if I had money I'd give her the 20 so that she wouldn't get hurt. He barred her from speaking to me, but we met at secret places and she kept my number under different male names. She had a problem in remembering numbers from the crack cocaine damage. I was the only friend she'd had in years. Together we had many chats. We laughed at things many would be shocked at. It was our way of coping, but we also had hard times. I challenged him, and I had been to her where he kept her, because we were both together one night, and so it was the first time I was in the basement kind of flat where she was, and the trafficker was there, but they stay in the main room, you didn't see them, and she showed me where she stayed. He put her in this little room beside. It wasn't really a bedroom, and it had a mattress, and all she had was this box of little tokens, like an 8-year-old keeps, you know, when they're little bits and pieces, and then she had a case, and it was just sex clothes, you know, that was her. But anyway, I didn't get to leave that flat that night with the money I had made. He made that very clear. But I was so angry. So he used to patrol the streets when she was out, and he couldn't stand me. But I was so angry after seeing her conditions. I naively approached him and told him what I thought of him. I won't repeat that colourful language. He said nothing. He just looked at me and he had this white scarf and threw it over his shoulder. He walked away. It was quite eerie, and nothing went in. And I thought, God, that's even stranger. I expected a punch or a slap. Just a few nights later, I always work Friday night, and a taxi pulled up, and she got out of the taxi and she came over to me. He was sitting in the front seat, and her face was badly bruised, and she looked at me and she said, "Why did you give out to him? He doesn't like it, you know." She defended him, which is a lot of women who have been trafficked and under control of someone for that many years. Their control is all that they know, and they will defend them. It's called trauma bonding. It's kind of like Stockholm syndrome, and but it's very hard to break that. But anyway, I also began then to challenge the men who bought her, because some of them knew the conditions she lived under, and I thought again naively that if I stopped them buying her, that she would become, you know, he wouldn't want her anymore because she wasn't making any money for him, and as well I was quite frustrated that these men knew that she was trafficked and they continued. In fact, she was more popular because of it. There's something very powerful with buyers about getting the use of another man's slave, because prostitution is not about sex, it is in fact about power. And but anyway, on one occasion I challenged one who had persistently bought her, and he said to me, I know it's terrible. I was thinking about moving her somewhere else, a nice, clean apartment. I said, "Are you mad?" He replied, "It just seems like the right thing to do." I lost it then and replied, "A man who has continued to buy a trafficked woman is trying to tell me about the right thing to do. Firstly, she's a chronic crack addict. How are you going to fix that? And secondly, she has a twisted sense of loyalty and an unhealthy attachment to a trafficker. I don't suppose you've got a clinical psychologist lined up. You just want to play the hero, and this is not a movie, this is her reality. And the best thing you can do for her is grab your ego and go home to your wife." Too many men not only come to buy us, but to try be some sort of saviour so they can feel not only powerful but protective. It's more like deluded and bewildered. It'd almost be funny, only these men messed around with the minds and bodies of some of the most damaged women I've ever met, and they were my friends, and I cared about them, and I missed them. And every day of my freedom, I will fight for theirs. So, sorry. So, I will end my story of my African friend with one of the saddest things I have ever seen. And for me, it puts it all into perspective. I was home alone one night as my daughter had become ill and needed some inpatient care. My phone rang and it was Mr. Hero himself, but he was different this time, extremely anxious, and had my friend with him. There had been a row between her trafficker and another girl. He said it was bad, could he please bring her over? She had never been to my home. I kept the street and home completely separate. I said yes because I was on my own. She arrived crying uncontrollably. I'd never seen her so upset. I told him to go and I'd look after her. I hugged her and checked her wounds as she had blood all over her hands. Thankfully, everything was superficial. It doesn't really matter what the fight was about, control, drugs, disobedience. I made her a coffee and we had a cigarette together. I said I would run her a bath and get her some PJs because she looked exhausted. I ran the bath with bubbles and left a towel out and called her in. I left her to relax and went into the other room. I was closing the window when she called me, and I turned around and what I saw shocked me to the core, for there in front of me stood my friend, naked, but she had the body of a child. Her ribs stuck out, there were no breasts, covered in old bruises, new bruises, scratches. She looked like someone who'd been just released from a concentration camp. My eyes welled up, but I didn't want her to see me cry, so I brought her back into the bathroom again. She had called me to wash her hair as her arms were sore. I washed her hair, took her out of the bath. She put the PJs on and she sat between my legs. On the floor as I brushed and blow dried her hair. She was humming like a child. I put her to bed and sat beside her until she fell asleep. And then I cried and cried for the lost child I had just put to bed. I'll never forget the image I saw that night, but this wasn't a concentration camp. Poland in 1945, this was my apartment, Dublin, 2010. There is no war, but there is no law to protect either. So, I made an attempt to get her out of the country as well. Again, when you're there, you don't realise that bond, and she came to stay with me, and I got one of the buyers to buy her a ticket out of the country. And I remember those few days, but she had no concept of freedom. She'd never been allowed to go to the shop on her own. He sometimes, if they went into the city, he'd give her €10 to go into the pound shop. And so when she was with me and we'd go to the shop, it was like being with a 5-year-old who was just out for the day, because everything was amazing, and then she'd run off on me, and it was quite strange. But after a couple of days, I had been on to a family member of hers. I'd managed to get a number, and she had 2 children in Africa she hadn't seen in a while, and the ticket was booked. She was to fly on Saturday, and but come Wednesday she began to talk about him again, and I thought, God, do you know, how do I keep him away? I had taken her battery out of the phone so I couldn't contact her. She snuck out on me on the Thursday night. She wanted to say goodbye to him. She wanted to say goodbye to the man who gave her her life and removed her freedom 10 years before. And that is the problem with rescuing some of the trafficked women. So he got to her. She did come back to me. We went shopping the next day, and I bought him a suitcase and filled it with little bits and pieces for her girls at home. But I had to go to work on that night because I needed money for my heroin, and she went back to him when she knew I was gone. So she never got on that plane. So anyway, I got out eventually with the help of a social worker, because I didn't make the decision on my own. In fact, mine would have been a lot darker. And then I went to rehab for 8 weeks, and I had to work with a clinical psychologist for 4 months because I had severe post-traumatic stress. But after about 10 months or so, I couldn't just move on with my life. I had left a lot of good women behind. I now realise the extent of the trafficking problem in my country, and it's shameful and terrible. And at the time, Ireland happened to be reviewing its laws on prostitution and trafficking, and I met with Denise Carlton, who is the CEO of the ICI. I'd already been with Ruhama, an incredible organisation, so I joined the fight as such. But I've spent a lot of time with survivors of trafficking in Ruhama, the ICI. I had recently, each EU member state were asked to send over 10 stories, cases, and I was the one in charge of putting these together, and each one was as terrifying as the next. It is horrendous what these women go through, every one of them. But I just wanted to tell you briefly this little story. I recently got to go on an outing with the survivors of trafficking organised by Ruhama. It was to Dublin Zoo. I took my adored granddaughter with me. She was 15 months old at the time, as I know some of the women have their children, and there happened to be a little girl approximately the same age as her. They played together as children do, for children don't see colour, only adults do. We had stopped to see the giraffes. They had a new enclosure since the last time I'd been there, and a new baby giraffe. And I picked the little girl up to show her. I said, they're giraffes, and they come all the way from Africa. She wasn't that bothered. She, like all toddlers, was more concerned with trying to climb the fence or attempt to climb the rock. My granddaughter had just managed normal toddler adventures. But I looked back around at the giraffes, and I thought, beautiful, graceful creatures from Africa. But then it occurred to me, we bring these animals to our country so that children get to see them. We treat them so well, give them the appropriate shelter, food and setting so that they can grow, be healthy and happy, and rightly so. But they are not the only thing that we now import to Ireland. For we now import women and children from Africa to satisfy the needs of a certain type of man, and it is not to be admired and treated with respect like the giraffes. Oh no, it is for very different reasons, and none of them have anything to do with admiration and respect. I picked up that little girl again, and I hugged her and I kissed her cheek, and I apologised on behalf of my country. I apologised for what had happened to her beautiful mother, and I told her things were about to change. I didn't continue to see the rest of the African plains. I couldn't, after making that connection in my lead, but also to build a better model driven. So that's where we're at. Those recommendations are sitting on Alan Shaller's desk, but he's, I think he's suffering from the deadliest form of denial, which is delay. And so we keep up campaigning and speaking and whatever. Northern Ireland now, I'm supposed to go on Thursday to give evidence. They're some way behind us, but they realise that we must do this as an island together, because I already know from a not very nice grapevine, but if we criminalise the buyers, the pimps and the traffickers are already making preparations to move up north, where it is still legal to buy someone. And so we need to do this as an island together, to tell them where to go, basically. And but not just that, it's just the right thing to do.